there's a reason you've never heard of him. Because emperors aren't supposed to scream, or end up skinned, stuffed, and mounted like a trophy. But Valerian did, and Rome erased him for it. They struck his name from statues, let his body rot in foreign chains. No funeral, no tomb, no honor, because when a god dies on his knees, you don't teach it in school. You've heard of Nero, of Caligula, of Commodus, but the most embarrassing emperor in Roman history, they buried him in silence. What Valerian did wasn't just shameful, it shattered the myth that Roman emperors were divine. In 260 CE, he marched east in golden armor, and ended up naked, shackled, a human footstool. Rome looked away, but Persia carved it in stone. Some say he was flayed alive, stuffed with straw, and hung in a temple like a hunting prize. Others say he rotted nameless in a cell. Either way, the empire wanted you to forget. But we remember. This is the story of Valerian, the Caesar who knelt. And if you want more history they tried to chew up and swallow, subscribe, because this is just the beginning. They say Rome never kneels, but Valerian did. And it started here, with a decision that looked like strength. Before the humiliation, before the chains, Valerian wasn't some mad tyrant or boy king. He was a Roman senator in his 60s, a career soldier, a man of letters. A rare emperor not born from bloodshed, but appointed for competence. When chaos tore Rome apart, he stepped up. The year was 253. The empire was a disaster zone. Civil war in the west, plague gutting cities, invasions at every border. And from the east, a new threat, Sharper I, King of Kings, ruler of the Sassanid Empire, who saw Rome not as a rival, but as prey. Valerian knew what he was walking into. In one surviving letter, he wrote of restoring the frontiers with discipline and divine favor. He believed Rome could still be salvaged, with force and with faith. So he gathered nearly 70,000 men and marched east to meet the Persians. But by the time he reached Edessa, modern Şanlıurfa, in southeastern Turkey, his army was already dying. Not from battle, from within. The plague of Cyprian had returned, a horror that turned blood to black froth and limbs to rot. By the time they reached the city walls, disease had already thinned their ranks. Tens of thousands fell without lifting a sword. And Shapur, he waited. He let the Romans cook in their own filth. Then, when their strength was spent, he struck. A full Sassanid force surrounded the camp. Valerian and his troops were trapped. You want to know how to break an empire? You don't need a sword. You just wait for the fever to do the work. Inside the Roman lines, morale collapsed. Zosimus describes confusion and trembling among the legions. Officers argued, food ran out, and every sunrise brought more dead than the day before. And then, Valerian did something fatal. He asked for a meeting, to negotiate terms, to protect what was left. That's the version Christian historian Lactantius tells us. And, in that version, it was a trap. Valerian approached under a flag of truce. He walked into Shapur's tent expecting diplomacy and left in chains. And in that moment, maybe he still thought it was a mistake. That Rome would send envoys, that his rank meant something. But deep down, he already felt the empire pulling away. Like a dying god watching his altar burn. The emperor of Rome in chains. No battlefield glory, no last stand. Just cold betrayal or maybe dumb faith. Either way, the Caesar was gone. And Rome? It didn't exactly scramble to get him back. Some records go silent. Others redact what happened entirely, almost like they were embarrassed. Almost like they knew what was coming next. Because Valerian wasn't killed right away. That would have been mercy. Instead, he was about to become something else. a human object lesson in how far an empire could fall. They didn't kill him. That would have been too quick. Shapur knew better. He didn't just want victory, he wanted theater. So he turned the Emperor of Rome into a stage prop. Valerian, a man who once commanded legions and wrote laws, now knelt before a Persian king. Not in battle, in chains. Stripped of his armor, stripped of his purple, stripped of his dignity. A living, breathing, trembling exhibit. He wasn't dead yet, but he was already history. Persian nobles were summoned to watch. This wasn't a private humiliation, it was ritual. Valerian was made to bow, to kneel, again and again. Sources say Shapur used him as a human mounting block, stepping on his back every time he climbed his horse. Yes, that's what Rome's divine emperor became. A literal footstool. Naksha Rustam, carved into stone, immortalized it. A massive rock relief, Shapur on horseback, towering, and beneath him, Valerian, kneeling, small, defeated. And you want to know something strange? That stone still stands. Tourists take selfies in front of it. Because Persia never hid what happened. But Rome buried it. No triumphs, no funerals, no, in memory of Valerian. They left him out of the records like he was a bad dream. One side built monuments. The other redacted the scrolls. We don't have Valerian's own words, but we know what silence sounds like. Imagine the voice of an emperor choked on dust, knees torn from stone, spine bent in front of cheering strangers. The shame so thick, Rome couldn't even speak of it. They called emperors gods on earth. But here was their god, beaten, caged, and crouching like an animal. Picture being his son back in the capital, receiving that message. No glory, just a father on his knees. And this wasn't even the worst of it. Because what came next wasn't humiliation. It was torture. So what do you do with a broken emperor? Shapur had options. He could ransom him, parade him, kill him quietly. But he chose none of those. Instead, he let Valerian rot in full view of the world. Here's where the stories split, and none of them are kind. Theory 1. According to Christian writer Lactantius, Valerian was flayed alive. Yes, skinned, head to toe. Then stuffed with straw, dyed red, and hung in a Persian temple like a grotesque taxidermy trophy. The emperor who once ruled Rome, reduced to decor, a leather warning sign nailed to history's wall. The Persians had rugs, now they had an emperor to match. Theory 2. Maybe Shapur kept him alive. Forced him into hard labor, hauling stones and building roads near Bishapur. From golden throne to gravel mule. Picture Valerian with a wheelbarrow, guarded by men who used to flinch at his name. And every time he bent over, that back remembered every imperial decree he once gave. Theory 3? He just died quietly. Years in captivity, malnourished, forgotten. Buried in sand, not ceremony. Not a martyr, not a god, not even a corpse Rome dared claim. 3 versions, 1 man, and not a single Roman record to tell us which one is true. Well, Persia bragged about capturing him, carved it in stone, remember? But they never described the aftermath. No mention of torture, because in Persian terms, the shame was the punishment. Why mutilate the man when kneeling did the job? Rome, on the other hand, didn't say a word. No funeral, no temple, no divine honors. Even Eutropius, the Roman historian, calls it disgraceful and moves on. It was the ancient version of deleting your embarrassing cousin from the family group chat. But Christians, they loved it. Valerian had persecuted the church, executed bishops, burned scriptures. So his flaying? That was divine payback. A godless emperor turned into a moral object lesson. Straight to hell, but flayed first for emphasis. You're starting to see the pattern, right? The Persians broke him. The Christians judged him. And the Romans? They buried him in silence. Because whatever really happened, Valerian's death wasn't just a loss. It was an exorcism. And the skin was just the beginning. They didn't damn his memory. They did something worse. They ignored it. Valerian, the only Roman emperor ever captured alive, just vanished. No triumph, no mourning, no monument. Even Eutropius, usually good for gossip, called it simply a disgraceful capture, then changed the subject. Because Rome didn't know what to do with a god in chains. You can't deify an emperor who was used as a saddle. So they quietly edited him out. Rome didn't strike his name in rage, they just ghosted him. But the Christians, they remembered. They loved it. Lactantius, writing half a century later, didn't hold back. He called Valerian's suffering divine justice. Why? Because in 257 and 258 CE, Valerian ordered the arrest and execution of Christian clergy. He personally signed the death warrants for Pope Sixtus II and St. Lawrence. So when he was chained, humiliated, and flayed, Lactantius said it was God evening the score. He even wrote, "He who once persecuted the servants of God now serves as a spectacle of his power." Tertullian, a century earlier, had predicted it. The blood of the martyrs is the seed of the church. Valerian made sure they had plenty. So Persia made a statue. Rome made silence. And Christians made a sermon out of his skin. And that's why no one talks about him. Not because he failed. Because he failed so hard, he became a parable. Valerian ruled an empire. Then he died in chains, or in pieces, or in silence. Pick your tragedy. To the Persians, he was a trophy. To Christians, a moral. To Rome, an embarrassment best left in the footnotes. They didn't avenge him. They didn't honor him. They didn't even pretend he mattered. No damnatio memoria. No state funeral. Just a quiet deletion. Because what do you do with a god who gets skinned alive? Shapur turned him into a monument. Lactantius turned him into a sermon. And Rome? They turned the page. So here's your history lesson. Even emperors can vanish. Not in war, but in shame. Not with a sword, but under a boot. Valerian bled, begged, broke, and disappeared. And they hoped you'd never ask why. But now you know. You know the story Rome tried to forget. And the skin the church turned into scripture. And if you want more blood-soaked secrets they buried in marble and prayer, subscribe. And click the video on the screen to see why the siege in Sancerre turned into a cannibal colony.